Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. I nearly broke my ankle on a gnome when I opened the door. I am Aaron and I was 28 when that stupid statue almost won. Back then I thought I was waking up to a normal Tuesday. Instead, I stepped into what looked like a yard-level prank war. They covered the grass in rows, lined up from the porch to the sidewalk. Dozens at least, and maybe more, all grinning like they knew something I didn't. I remember just standing there in my old t-shirt, completely blank. Later I called it shock, but in that moment it felt like an attack. And I already knew exactly who would think this was hilarious. My phone vibrated in my pocket while I stared at the gnomes. One unread text from an unknown number waited on the lock screen. I opened it and saw the letters HOA, and my stomach dropped hard. They gave me 48 hours to remove unauthorized yard items or face fines. I looked up again and the gnomes suddenly felt heavier than concrete on my chest. Inside the house, Mark was still asleep on the couch, totally oblivious. I marched back through the doorway and slammed it harder than necessary behind me. Even now I can hear that slam because it was the first warning shot. At the time, I just wanted him awake and on my side fast. I did not know yet that his idea of sides worked differently. Mark shuffled toward the door, rubbing his face while I pulled the curtain back. The second he saw the yard, his whole expression lit up like a kid. He grabbed his phone before saying anything and started filming a slow, dramatic sweep. I stood beside him with the HOA text open and my jaw locked tight. He still had not asked why I looked ready to snap. "Tell her to come get them now." He laughed instead and zoomed in on one gnome like it was comedy gold. "Relax, this is just Jenna being Jenna." His camera kept moving like my panic was part of the bit. He loved her pranks because to him they meant family and fun and history. To me in that moment they meant a notice and money we did not really have. While he kept filming, I opened the doorbell app and pulled up the night recordings. 3 a.m. pops up on the timeline and my pulse jumps. Headlights sweep across the driveway, then figures spill out carrying gnomes 2 at a time. One voice cuts through the crappy audio clear enough that I feel it in my teeth. "Faster before she wakes up, this is going to kill her." I did not need the video to show her face because my body already recognized the tone. That fake whisper she uses when she wants attention without sounding like she wants attention. Back then I still tried to convince myself we were almost sisters and this was just messy love. Now writing this, I can admit my first clear thought was simpler and meaner. Of course it is Jenna, who else would turn my house into content? A jogger slowed in front of the house while I replayed the clip again. He lifted his phone toward the yard and angled it so I ended up in frame too. For a second I imagined myself tagged in some stranger's story as the crazy gnome lady. I stepped back onto the doormat and let the door hit my heel harder than intended. I was already the punchline and I had not even spoken yet. Another buzz hit my phone and I hoped for an apology that I knew would not come. It was the same unknown number, now warning that continued violation could mean legal escalation. I pictured some board member flipping through photos of my lawn and checking a box. On the sidewalk, our next door neighbor slowed down and stared at the gnomes with a tight jaw. She did not wave, and I felt that more than the threat in the text. I shoved the phone toward Mark and tapped the screen like the message might sink in if I pushed hard enough. He glanced at it once and shrugged with that infuriating half-smile he used whenever life looked like a sitcom. "They never enforce this stuff for real and Jenna will swing by later." He rubbed his eyes and walked back inside, already reaching for his laptop again. The door closed behind him and left me alone with a yard full of jokes that were not mine. If this was funny, then I was obviously not the right audience, and that hit harder than I expected. I stared at the nearest gnome and knew I would be the only one cleaning this up when the laughing stopped. Back then I still hoped someone would treat that like a warning instead of the decision it was already becoming. Nobody did, and that is why I eventually got rid of every last one. I grabbed one of the gnomes by the head and yanked. It barely moved and my wrist jolted like I had pulled on a bolt. For a second I pictured it slipping and smashing through my toes. I let go too fast and it toppled sideways against another statue. My phone chimed in my pocket while the two gnomes clacked together. A car crawled past the house and someone leaned over with a camera. I pretended to brush dirt off my shorts just to look less pathetic. Inside, I felt like I was trapped in a live episode nobody warned me about. Kids rolled up on bikes and stopped right at the edge of our lawn. One pointed at the mess and laughed loud enough that I felt it. Another lifted his phone and shouted something about posting it. I straightened up and folded my arms because otherwise I was going to scream. They rode away still laughing, and I knew that clip would outlive this day. I went straight to the room where Mark worked and leaned on the doorway. His headset was on and he held up a finger without looking away from the screen. I waved my phone anyway and opened the message that had just arrived. This one mentioned possible penalties and a note about ongoing noncompliance. That phrase made my throat close because it sounded like I had done something criminal. When his call ended, he spun around and pushed his chair back with a sigh. I thrust the phone toward him and waited while he scanned the text. Still not a big deal. He set the phone on the desk and rubbed his eyes like I was exhausting. Hearing that felt worse than the idea of paying anything. They are threatening charges now. My voice came out higher than usual, and I hated how shaky it sounded. He shrugged and reached for his keyboard like we were done. Jenna is on her way over later. He said it like that solved everything and like I was the obstacle. Back then I still wanted to be reasonable, so I tried one more time. Can you call her and tell her to hurry? He tapped his screen and glanced at his messages. She is busy right now and she will swing by when she can. That "when she can" landed like a brick right on my chest. I left before I started crying because I refused to give him that scene. In the kitchen, I opened my group chat and sent a quick photo of the front yard. The replies came fast and all over the place. One friend spammed laughing emojis and another wrote that it looked insane. Only one person asked if I was okay, and that question stung the most. I typed that the neighborhood board was involved and my hands trembled over the screen. Someone wrote that they would die of embarrassment and I almost threw my phone. Another joked that I should keep the statues out of spite. I stared at their messages and wondered if I was overreacting or if they were just not there. Even now, I still go back and forth on that one. A knock sounded at the front door while I was still in the chat. Sharp and quick, like the person outside had already lost patience. I opened it and our neighbor stood there with her lips pressed tight. Hey, I hate to bring this up. Her eyes flicked past me to the front and stayed there. Her husband hovered on their driveway with his hands on his hips. He would not look over, but his whole body screamed annoyed. We have a meeting next week and he is worried this will cause trouble. She lowered her voice on that last part like we were sharing some secret. Hearing that made the whole thing feel less like a prank and more like a warning. I apologized even though none of those figures were mine. Words tumbled out about it being temporary and handled soon. She nodded, still staring out at the lawn, and said she hoped so. Her shoulders were tense as she walked away, and she never turned around. That little detail stayed in my head for days like a stuck splinter. After she left, I opened the message thread from the board and typed a reply. I explained that the display was placed there as a joke by relatives. The answer came back short and unfriendly. They did not care who dragged them onto the property and only that they stayed there. Reading that, I felt something cold settle under the anger. I walked back to the front window and watched a delivery driver slow down. He craned his neck to look while handing over a package. Even he grinned as he passed one of the figures near the walkway. I signed for the box with a tight smile I did not mean. Inside, I wanted to disappear into the floorboards and leave them all outside. Later that afternoon, my notifications exploded without any new alerts from work or bills. Jenna had uploaded a short clip featuring our place front and center. She jumped around between the statues while on-screen text called it the ultimate prank. The caption bragged about staying up late just to set this up. Comments piled under it calling her a legend and me lucky. I watched strangers rate my reaction off that clip where I looked confused and tired. The part where I stepped back on the porch was looped again and again. Someone wrote that I looked uptight. Another replied that the prank would teach me to chill. None of them had any clue there were formal notices involved and money mentioned. My thumb hovered over the comment box while my heart hammered. For a minute, I wanted to explain everything right under her post. I could picture exactly how that would go. Screenshots, more people dragged in, me labeled dramatic and controlling. So I closed the app because I was not ready to be a public villain yet. When Mark came out for a break, he scrolled through his feed and let out a laugh. Oh my God, she really went for it. He propped his phone against a mug and replayed the edited clip. You kind of look like you saw a crime. He thought it was a compliment, and that detail still makes me wince. I messaged the board already. I leaned on the counter and waited for him to look up. They do not care who bought them. He tossed his phone down and reached for a snack from the cupboard. They always send official-sounding stuff and then nothing happens. If nothing happens, then why are the neighbors worried? That came out sharper than I intended and hung there between us. He stopped chewing for a second but did not answer right away. I will handle it with Jenna when she gets here. That phrase again, like my entire day, hinged on his sister's schedule. Evening crept up and the statues stayed where they had been dumped. Cars slowed down and then moved on, and every set of eyes felt personal. I watered the small patch of plants near the porch just to have something to do. The hose swept across a pair of gnomes, and they glistened like they were smirking at me. I twisted the nozzle off harder than necessary and nearly broke it. My phone buzzed with a new text from Jenna much later than promised. Traffic, I might not make it today, but everyone loves the video. That last line hit me harder than the excuse. I stared at her message until the words blurred and my grip went numb. That was the moment I knew we were not laughing at the same thing. I walked outside again and stood in the middle of the lawn. The figures sat there mute and ridiculous, yet the pressure behind my eyes felt anything but funny. I imagined the notice doubling, or some meeting where my name got read out. I imagined Jenna turning even that into a joke online. Somewhere between those two pictures, my patience snapped without making a sound. I opened my laptop and typed 3 words into a listing site. Garden figures free. My fingers hovered over the post button while my pulse kicked harder. If I tapped once, the whole mess would start vanishing. If I backed out, I knew I would still be staring at them tomorrow. I erased garden figures and replaced it with the real word. Gnomes free pickup. No description, no jokes, no explanation, just location and urgency. In the box for details I wrote, must take several at once. That line felt petty and weirdly satisfying at the same time. Before posting, I opened the last message from the neighborhood office again. There it was in plain text, possible pursuit of further action. I remembered my neighbor's husband glowering at his driveway like I had personally attacked him. I remembered Jenna's "everyone loves the video" message like it canceled everything else. That mix of images pushed me over and I hit publish. The first reply arrived before I even closed the tab. Still available, can come now. The second one pinged right after with almost the same words. They did not care about who owned them, they just wanted free decorations. I picked the first one and dropped my address with a short front yard. Dragging the nearest line of statues toward the driveway felt like hauling bags of wet cement. They wobbled and knocked against my shins while I shuffled them in clumps. Across the street, curtains fluttered and then stayed shut, which somehow felt louder than comments. I stacked the first batch near the curb, facing away from the house. It looked like I was lining them up for a firing squad, and maybe I was. Halfway through moving the second cluster, I had to stop and stretch my hands. My palms ached and I could feel dirt scraping my skin each time I grabbed another one. Why am I the only one doing this? I muttered at a statue with a chipped nose. Of course it did not answer, it just grinned like all of this worked in its favor. That stupid grin was probably the real thing that kept me going. A van pulled up while I was still rearranging the piles near the street. A teenager jumped out fast and practically jogged toward the figures. You are not kidding, there are a ton. She walked around them like she had won some contest. Her dad leaned on the open door and gave me an apologetic nod. I pointed at the rows closer to the sidewalk because I wanted those gone first. Take as many as you can fit. Her eyes lit up in a way that made me feel both generous and reckless. I saw these online this morning, she said, balancing one on her hip. Could not believe someone was giving them away. For sure taking them, she added, loading statues into the back with quick movements. I tried not to think about the phone that had filmed them earlier online. Tried not to wonder if she recognized the yard or my face from Jenna's stunt. If she did, she kept that thought to herself, which I appreciated. More than she knew. In that moment, quiet felt like a gift. By the time they left, a wide stripe of grass showed through the gaps. Another car rolled up almost instantly, and a couple climbed out. They pointed at different ones, negotiated in low voices, then started stacking them in their trunk. We barely spoke, just nodded, passing silent approval back and forth like a secret. After they drove away, the whole scene looked less like chaos and more like recovery. My shirt stuck to my back while I cleared another row near the porch. I bent down, grabbed two at once, and nearly lost my balance. The thought popped up that Jenna might roll in at any second with a camera. She would swing the lens around, see half the crowd missing, and turn that into a new bit. Imagining that made my grip tighten until my knuckles hurt. A pickup stopped farther down, and a guy stepped out with work gloves already on. He clearly came prepared, and I will admit that impressed me. Mind if I help load these? He asked, glancing at the remaining ones. Please do. We worked in short bursts, carrying clusters to his truck while he whistled under his breath. At one point he paused and wiped his forehead with his wrist. You clearing space or clearing bad vibes? The question landed closer to home than he could have known. Both. I forced a quick smile, then grabbed another pair before my eyes gave away too much. It took 3 more visitors before the lawn actually looked like something normal again. Each time someone hauled a group away, my chest loosened a notch. Not completely, just enough to notice I had been holding tension everywhere. I know I sound dramatic, I get that they were plastic. But every figure gone felt like one less reminder of how little my comfort mattered. When the last car left, I walked the property line slowly. 2 were still tucked under the bushes near the porch steps, half hidden. I pulled them out and set them aside near the railing. These I did not list, I wanted proof that they existed and that I had not imagined all of it. Keeping them felt wrong and necessary at the same time. On my way back inside, I checked the mailbox out of reflex. A thick envelope sat wedged against the edge with the association name printed on top. I tore the side open right there and unfolded the single page inside. They had already assigned an amount, not a warning, an actual number. Seeing that figure in ink made my stomach twist in a new direction. For a second I thought about snapping a picture of the paper and sending it straight to Jenna. No caption, no explanation, just the proof that this joke had a price. Then I pictured her resharing it with some comment about haters and no fun allowed. I folded the letter in half then again and slid it under a stack of mail near the door. Part of me hated myself for hiding it, another part knew this would become ammunition later. The house felt too quiet when I finally stepped inside. My shoes left faint prints on the floor and that tiny detail annoyed me. I poured a glass of water and took a long drink without tasting anything. In my head, I replayed every moment from that afternoon like a rough cut of footage. Somewhere in that mental reel, I started building my defense for what I had just done. The lock clicked behind me an hour later, and I heard Mark drop his keys on the counter. He walked straight to the front window and pushed the curtain aside. Where are they? No hello, no pause, just that question hanging in the air. His shoulders tensed while he scanned the empty lawn. I stayed near the sink with my hands wrapped around the glass. People pick them up. He turned toward me so fast the curtain swung back into place. You gave them away. He stared like I had unloaded a family heirloom during a yard sale. They were never ours. My voice came out steadier than I felt, and that surprised me. The homeowners group already sent a charge and neighbors were complaining. He ran a hand through his hair and paced a tight line across the kitchen. You could have waited until I talked to her. I wanted to laugh at that and also maybe scream. She had all day and she is the one who left them there. Words bounced around the room and I could hear my heartbeat between each sentence. I am the one they are emailing, not hers. That last part slipped out sharper than planned and sliced the air between us. He grabbed his phone and tapped the screen with jerky movements. She is going to lose it when she hears about this. There it was again, the center of gravity in our fights, his focus tilting outward. I watched him draft a message and erase it twice, like he cared more about her reaction than mine. That realization hurt more than any comments online ever could. While he stood there rehearsing his explanation, my own phone started buzzing on the counter. Unknown number, same area code as Jenna's, vibrating nonstop until the SC Rian dimmed. It lit up again immediately with her name across the top this time. I knew exactly how that conversation would go, and I still picked up. Because once I cleared that lawn, there was never going to be a quiet version of this story. I answered before the second ring finished, and her voice hit me. What did you do? No hello, no pause, just that question like a slap. I leaned against the counter because my knees did not feel reliable. Across the room, Mark watched me with his jaw locked and waiting. You sound busy. That came out flatter than I meant, and she pounced on it. You dumped my collection. The last word tore out of her like she was talking about puppies. I knew right then this call was not going to stay private. I found strangers hauling my pieces away, she pushed on without breathing. Do you have any clue what those were worth? She rattled off some wild figure that could have bought another car. I stared at the empty front window and felt my stomach turn. Even now, I think that number came straight from thin air. They were bargain decorations, I answered, fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. You bought them for a joke and left them on our property. Silence buzzed on the line for 2 long beats. Then she laughed, short and mean, like she heard the perfect opening. Wow, you really believe that gives you the right to trash my stuff? I removed them because the notices had already escalated. I could hear my own voice shake, and I hated it. You never checked in, you never came over, you left them on us. I know I repeated that point, but at the time it felt crucial. It was the only piece of ground that actually belonged to me. She switched gears fast, which she always did when cornered. My art, my content, my money, you tossed all of it without warning. Every mile landed like a brick while I stared at our front step. Do you understand that is destruction of property? Her tone jumped from injured to lawyer drama in a heartbeat. You want me to call someone, she added, voice going fake calm. Because I can talk to people about this, judges, officers, whoever. I knew she had zero clue how that process even worked. Still, hearing words like that with my name in the same breath froze me. I opened my mouth and nothing came out for a second. During that pause, Mark walked over and held out his hand. I gave him the phone because I honestly needed air. He pressed speaker and set it on the table between us. What is going on? He asked, shoulders tight, eyes bouncing between us. He sounded more stressed about the argument than the actual mess. She gave my stuff away. Her voice cracked just enough to sound wounded. I warned you she hated the prank and she waited to ruin it. Hearing that twist made my chest burn in a new way. It turned me from overwhelmed partner into saboteur in 3 sentences. I got a written notice today, I cut in, tapping the folded letter. There is already a charge with our address on it. I unfolded the page and held it up even though she could not see. I am not leaving that hanging while the whole neighborhood watches. I know my words tumbled over each other, but I was done being careful. On the line she scoffed so loud it crackled. Oh please, you think the association is going to go nuclear over lawn decor? That phrase made me laugh once, sharp and humorless. They already billed us, I repeated, jabbing the amount with my finger. The only person who did not take this seriously is you. You always were intense. She hit that word like it explained everything wrong with me. Normal people can handle jokes without calling the cops and the board. The worst part is that for a second I wondered if she was right. That tiny doubt still annoys me more than her threats. This was not harmless fun, I said, quieter because yelling never worked with her. You filmed me, you posted it, you left the result on me to fix. I looked over and saw Mark flinch like I had dragged him onto a stage. Jenna caught that hesitation through nothing but silence and moved in. See, now you dragged him into your meltdown too. I am already in it, he muttered, rubbing his forehead with his palm. Why did you not wait until I handled this? That was aimed at me, not her, and it landed hard. I did wait, I answered, heat rising in my face again. Days while you both gathered views and I gathered threats. On the phone, I heard sniffling and realized she had started crying mid-fight. I cannot believe you're letting her talk to me like this. Her voice went small and shaky, which always worked on him. He straightened, caught between us, and I could almost see the split happen. Half brother, half partners, no middle ground holding. I am not picking a side, he said, even though that sentence is always a choice. You two need to calm down before this wrecks everything. That line actually made my vision blur because it sounded rehearsed. This already wrecked everything, I replied, quieter than before but more certain. I took responsibility for something I never asked for and now I am the criminal. She blew out a breath loud enough to rattle the speaker. Here is what is going to happen. There it was, the decree voice. You are going to compensate me for the full value of my installations. She used that word like she had curated a museum, not a stunt. I am not paying you thousands for store shelf junk, I snapped, control gone. If you want them so much, go ring every door that picked them up. Even now, I know that line was cruel, but I do not regret it. For once, I wanted her to chase something instead of tossing it at us. The silence that followed stretched long enough to make my skin itch. Then we are done. The way she said it chilled me more than the earlier threats. You and I are done, and if this goes to court, that is on you. The call ended with a hard click and the house fell quiet. I remember hearing my own breathing like it belonged to someone else. Mark stared at the dark screen for a heavy beat. You had to escalate, he finally said, shoulders sagging, voice low. I listened to the whole thing, I answered, hands shaking against my glass. She just tried to invoice us for multiples of our rent. I know that number is an exaggeration now, but it felt that outrageous. He paced a tight line between the counter and the doorway. You know how she is, he muttered, dragging a hand through his hair. If you throw gas on it, she burns everything down. That comparison hit me wrong, like I was the spark and she was some unstoppable force. You realize she lit this one herself? I asked, watching his face carefully. Instead of answering, he picked up the letter I had left on the table. He scanned the text, eyes moving fast, lips pressed into a thin line. So this is real, he said after a pause, almost to himself. Of course it is real, I replied, the exhaustion swallowing my anger for a moment. I would not have cleared anything out if it was just empty threats. Before we could go another round, his phone buzzed nonstop on the counter. The family chat exploded with new messages, flashing in a long column. He opened it and his whole expression tightened. Jenna had already posted her version, complete with crying selfie and caption about betrayal. Scrolling that thread felt like standing in the middle of a storm without cover. Cousins who barely spoke to me on holidays were dropping opinions. A prank is not a crime. She always overreacts. Who throws away someone else's passion? They did not use my name, just she, but it was clear who they meant. One message made me grip the back of the chair until my hand hurt. I would move out if my partner trashed my sister's collection. That line sat there while reactions piled up under it. Mark did not add anything, which somehow stung worse than if he had agreed. His silence in that chat showed me exactly where I ranked. A notification banner slid across the top of my screen next. New story from Jenna. I swiped before I could stop myself and there it was. Clips of the original setup, then a shot of the empty lawn from her car window. Bold text across the screen read, she gave them away while I was at work. No mention of fees. No mention of letters. No context beyond her loss and my supposed cruelty. Right under the footage, she added a poll asking if she should press charges or just walk away. Thousands of little votes lined up while I watched in a kind of stunned haze. Turn that off, Mark muttered, rubbing his temples without looking at me. You should be telling her to remove it, I answered, thumb hovering over the screen. He let out a long breath and sank into the nearest chair. If I push, she gets worse. That excuse landed like a confession he did not realize he was making. I locked my phone and set it face down with more force than necessary. My heart raced, but underneath that was something quieter and heavier. I realized I had cleaned up her mess in the yard, and now I was cleaning it online by staying silent. That role was starting to feel way too familiar in more places than this. And I had not even heard from the association since the delivery of that sheet. Right on cue, there was a sharp knock at the door, 3 quick hits. I walked over, bracing myself for another neighbor ready to complain. 2 people from the office stood there with clipboards tucked under their arms. "We are here to verify the removal of the display," one of them said, eyes scanning the front. For a second, I felt something close to vindication and also a fresh wave of dread. They stepped off the porch, checked the front, then marked something on their pages. "Everything appears in order now," the other one noted, not quite meeting my gaze. "The fee already issued will remain on account, but no additional action is planned." That last line told me exactly how little the argument about who owned what mattered. They walked back to their car while I stood there gripping the doorknob hard. When I closed the door again, Mark was watching from the hallway. "So that is it?" he asked, voice flat, hands shoved into his pockets. "For them, yes," I answered, letting my head rest against the wood for a second. "For your sister and the internet, not even close." I knew we had crossed some line we were not getting back from. I turned my phone back on, and the first thing I saw was my own face. A freeze frame from Jenna's clip, eyes half closed, mouth twisted. Someone had grabbed that image and paired it with text calling me deranged. I nearly dropped the phone right there at the kitchen table. Honestly, that word stuck harder than all the legal threats. Comments stacked under the repost, all from strangers who only knew her side. They guessed my job, my income, my mental state, everything. Classic joy killer. She ruined it out of jealousy. Reading that, I felt weirdly exposed, like they had broken into my house. I screenshotted the worst ones and sent them to Mark. He was down the hall in his work corner, headphones on again. "You seeing this?" I texted, even though we were in the same building. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then nothing. That silence made my fingers tingle with anger. I walked over instead and tapped his desk with 2 knuckles. He slid one ear cup aside and glanced up, impatient already. "Your sister's followers are in my messages now." I held the screen in front of him so he had to actually read. His eyebrows drew together, but not as much as I needed. "You should block them." He nudged the phone back toward me and reached for his mouse. "That is your advice?" I asked, my voice going thin again. Not "this has gone too far," not "I will talk to her." He winced, which at least told me he heard how that sounded. "I did talk to her last night." He leaned back and rubbed his eyes like he had not slept. "She swears those pieces were valuable, and you blindsided her." Hearing that phrase again made my stomach clench. He was repeating her script almost word for word. So her price tag matters more than my sanity. I knew I was playing dirty there, but I was tired. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then pushed his chair back. "I am stuck in the middle here." That line always means you think both sides are equally unreasonable. I laughed once short and ugly. "You are standing between us, but you keep facing her." His jaw worked like he wanted to argue with that. Instead, he picked up his phone and scrolled their chat. I watched his thumb hover like he was afraid of the next message. My own screen buzzed again, this time with my friend's group thread. One of them had seen Jenna's poll and sent it with a "yikes." Another added, "She is making you look unhinged." Then finally, "You need receipts." That last line kept echoing while the others sent sympathy emojis. I did have something physical, just not the kind they meant. The letter sat on the counter where I had left it after folding it in half. I tapped it with my nail, thinking about sending a photo publicly. Then I pictured the board's name in some viral post. They would definitely not appreciate starring in that circus. A few hours later, I stepped outside to drag the bin to the curb. As I rolled it down the driveway, someone called my name from the sidewalk. It was the teenager who had taken some of the figures the day before. She jogged over holding her phone, eyes wide, almost nervous. "Sorry to bug you, but I think you should see this." She opened a video already paused in the middle. There was Jenna pushing a cart piled high with those same ridiculous statues. On-screen text read "Clearance Hall" with laughing emojis bouncing around. The date stamp in the corner was from the week before everything hit my yard. My heart did a weird flip when I saw that tiny line of numbers. "She tagged the store," the girl pointed out, zooming in. "People are arguing in the comments about whether they are cheap or not." I watched Jenna spin one of them around while bragging about getting them for almost nothing. The caption mentioned ugly cute trash and content props. None of it matched the epic loss story she had fed everyone since. "Can you send that to me?" I asked, trying not to sound desperate. The girl nodded and hit share with quick taps. "I liked your yard better without them anyway." She said it lightly, but my throat tightened. It was the first time anyone on that street took my side out loud. Back in the kitchen, the clip looped on my phone while I leaned on the counter. Part of me felt vindicated, like I had finally found a piece of ground that was not shifting. Another part knew this would not magically fix anything. People rarely admit they lied once they have built an entire narrative on it. Still, I saved the video twice, just in case it disappeared. When Mark finished his work calls that evening, I met him by the window. "I need you to watch something." He hesitated, then took the phone and pressed play. I watched his face instead of the recording, every tiny shift. At the date stamp, his eyes narrowed. "So this was before everything," he murmured, more to himself than to me. He replayed the beginning, where she bragged about the discount. "That sounds like she bought all of them for cheap." He did not say lied, he did not say exaggerated, just cheap. Even that small admission felt like pulling teeth. "She told you they were worth how much again?" I asked, keeping my tone level. He looked away, jaw tight, suddenly very interested in the floorboards. "I do not know the exact amount." I stared at him until he shifted his weight. "Do you at least see why I am losing my mind here?" He paced a slow loop, then stopped with his hand on the back of a chair. "What if she had older ones mixed in?" he offered, reaching for any angle. "What if those were just backups?" Hearing him hunt for ways to rescue her version made my chest burn. It felt like watching someone patch a sinking boat while you are already underwater. "You think I tracked down the wrong statues?" I could hear my voice climbing again and forced it back down. I moved what was on the grass in front of this address. My palm hit the table with a dull thud that startled me. He flinched too, which told me how tightly wound we both were. "Can you admit one thing?" I asked, choosing each word carefully. "She lied about the cost to make this look worse." He dragged a hand over his face and let out a long breath. "I think she made it sound bigger than it was," he finally answered. That half step forward still kept me in the role of problem. "That is not a minor detail," I pushed, refusing to let it slide away. "She framed me as someone who destroyed priceless work, not discount props." My throat hurt, but the words kept coming anyway. "You are asking me to fix her drama while pretending we are dealing with equal damage." Even retelling this now, my chest tightens again at that imbalance. He picked up his phone and opened the family chat without me asking. New messages filled the screen, mostly backing Jenna, some hinting at legal talk. He scrolled, lips pressed together, then tapped her name. "I am calling her," he muttered, more like a warning to himself than to me. I folded my arms and stayed right there. She answered almost immediately, voice already teed up for a fresh round. "Please tell me you are not caving to her sob story." He put her on speaker and set the phone on the table again. "I saw the clip from your shopping trip," he started, tone cautious. "You said these pieces were rare." There was a pause, then a burst of forced laughter. "Seriously, that again? Those were just filler shots." She spoke faster now, piling words on top of each other. "I have older ones at home from before that store even opened." Every sentence felt like watching someone build a tower on air. "You told me you spent a huge amount on the group she removed." His voice sharpened in a way that caught my attention. On the line, her breath hitched for just a fraction of a second. "I invested in my brand, not junk," she snapped, volume climbing. "Why are you nitpicking my numbers instead of dealing with her behavior?" I could not help it, I jumped in. "That video shows you bragging about how little you paid." My hand shook where it rested on the back of the chair. "You are not grieving heirlooms, you are mad your episode ended early." I knew she would never forgive that sentence, even before it finished leaving my mouth. "You are obsessed with me," she shot back, voice icy now. "You stalk my content, you twist it, you spread it around." Hearing her flip it that way almost made me laugh. "You turn my house into a set and my life into a segment," I fired back. "If anyone is obsessed, look at your upload schedule." Mark raised both hands like he could physically calm the call. "This is going nowhere," he muttered, more to the room than the phone. "Can we at least agree the online stuff stops now?" She scoffed so loud the speaker distorted. "I am not taking anything down until she replaces what she threw away." "So that is it?" I asked, stunned at how transactional it sounded. "You trash my reputation until I pay you off." There was another small silence, the dangerous kind. "Call it consequences," she replied, then hung up without another word. The quiet afterward rang in my ears. Mark stared at the screen like it might turn back on if he glared hard enough. I waited a full 10 seconds before talking, just listening to both our breathing. "You heard her," I finally said, softer now. "This is not about stuff anymore, it is control." Saying that out loud clicked something into place in my own head. He slumped into the chair and rubbed his forehead again. "I hate all of this," he muttered, voice low, eyes fixed on the table. "Every conversation lately turns into a fight." I sat across from him and folded my hands to keep them steady. "Every conversation lately reveals who you are afraid of upsetting more." That line hung between us like a challenge neither of us wanted. He looked up, and for the first time he did not deny it. "I am not ready to blow up my family over lawn ornaments." The phrase landed heavy in my chest, heavier than any insult. Because to him, that was all this would ever be. I leaned back and let that sink all the way in. If he truly believed this started and ended with silly figures, we were done before we began. "Good to know where this ranks," I said, standing up slowly. My legs felt strange, like they belonged to someone else walking away. I went to the garage and pulled open the storage cabinet without thinking. One of the last two statues waited there on the shelf where I had left it. I grabbed it and set it on the workbench in front of me. It stared ahead with that frozen expression, and suddenly I saw our entire situation in it. Decorative, replaceable, good for a laugh until it caused trouble. Then blamed for the mess when people tripped over it. I did not smash it, even though the urge was strong. Instead, I turned it to face the wall and stepped back. That tiny act felt petty and also like a promise to myself. I was done being the background for someone else's highlight reel. I just had not admitted yet how far that decision would reach. I yanked the suitcase from under the bed and snapped it open on the floor. The sound carried down the hallway, and I heard his chair scrape. "Really?" came from the doorway, flat and already tired. I kept folding clothes anyway, not trusting my mouth yet. Once I start talking in moments like that, I rarely stop in time. "You are packing," he said, stepping into the room like it might bite. "Yeah." My hands kept moving, slower than my heart. "I toured a place yesterday." There it was, out loud, too late to reel back. He grabbed the closet frame and leaned there, watching every move. "So after everything, you just bail?" His eyes were red from stress or screens, or maybe me, I do not know. "I am done living in a house where I am the punchline," I answered. It came out rough, but I meant every word. "You are leaving over lawn junk," he threw back, lifting both arms. That sentence told me he still did not get it. "It is not about the props," I said, shoving shoes into the bag. "It is about who you shield when things explode." He opened his mouth, then shut it again, jaw clenching. "I told her to drop it," he insisted, moving closer to the bed. "She told me she wants distance for a while." He tugged at a loose thread on the comforter like his fingers needed something to wreck. "So you win, you got what you wanted, you scared her off." Hearing that twist almost made me laugh from sheer disbelief. "You think I wanted this outcome?" I asked, staring straight at him. "I wanted you to back me when I was drowning." My voice shook, but I did not look away. "You kept waiting for her to cool down on her own." He looked down like the floor might offer a better answer. A sharp knock rattled the front door before he could reply. We both froze like kids who broke something in a store. I left the suitcase half filled and walked to the entry. Through the glass, I saw a delivery uniform and a clipboard. Of course, because these days drama came with tracking numbers. The envelope was stiff and heavy in my hand. My name sat on the front, not his, not ours, just mine. I slid it open with my thumb and unfolded the pages. A demand letter, templated and dramatic, accusing me of everything Jenna had ranted about. Underneath the paragraphs, her signature looped like a performance. "Is that real?" he asked from behind me, hovering in the hallway. It is loud, not real, I muttered, scanning the fake legal phrases. No docket number, no court stamp, just threats dressed up as official. My chest did that weird hot-cold flip, anger and relief fighting. She had actually paid for this stunt, and somehow that made it worse. For what it is worth, this would collapse instantly, I said, dropping it on the table. But she wanted me scared enough to stop breathing. He stared at the letter, then at me, torn between two directions. She should not have sent that, he admitted, rubbing his neck. Hearing him finally criticize her felt late and small. If she can drag my name onto mail like that, I said, tapping the paper, she can drag it anywhere. Online. Holiday dinners. Rooms I am not in. You will stand there every time telling everyone you are neutral. He flinched like I had slapped him harder than the envelope did me. That is not fair, he protested, shoulders rising. I keep asking both of you to stow. There it was again, the equal blame, washed clean of context. Even now, that part still gets under my skin. I picked up my phone and opened Jenna's profile one last time. Fresh clips sat on her feed, new pranks, new targets, comments flooding in. The whole gnome saga was buried under newer chaos, just another episode. My face only appeared in older posts now, still there, still mocked. I hovered over the block button, fingers shaking a little. I will be honest, I wanted to send her a message first. Something sharp, something that would finally land, something I would regret. I even typed out a line about filing a complaint of my own. Then I pictured her screenshotting it and sharing it with dramatic music. My thumb held down backspace until the bubble went empty. I hit block without a goodbye and the screen jumped. Her profile vanished like it never existed, replaced by a blank notice. Nothing actually changed in the world, but my brain felt a tiny click. For once, I was the one closing a door instead of waiting outside it. Strange how quiet a digital slam can feel. Back in the bedroom, the suitcase waited with its open mouth. I tossed in the last few things I could not leave behind. No shared photos, no gifts from his family, I left those where they were. Not out of spite, more like I refused to carry their history for them. Every item I dropped into that bag felt like a small decision under a bigger one. He stood in the doorway again while I zipped the case. So that is it, he asked, voice low and rough. You walk out and what, pretend this never happened? I straightened up and grabbed the handle before answering. I walk out and stop pretending this is healthy. I know I failed parts of this, I added, surprising both of us. I yelled, I tossed words that were meant to cut. I am not proud of those moments, and it matters that I admit it. But I will not keep begging for backup that never shows. His eyes glossed and he looked away when I finished. We lugged the suitcase to the front together because old habits die slow. He opened the door while I adjusted my grip, a sad little choreography. Outside, the yard looked normal again, just grass and pavement. You would never guess there had been a whole plastic army out there. Only my body remembered the knot in my stomach every time I stepped outside. Our neighbor stood by her car sorting grocery bags. She spotted the luggage and raised her brows in a silent question. I gave a small shrug that said more than I wanted. She hesitated, then lifted one hand in a quick, awkward salute. That tiny gesture weirdly felt like someone whispering, "You are not crazy." At the trunk of my car, he grabbed the other end of the suitcase. You could stay somewhere else for a week, he offered, voice urgent. Cool off, then come back and we figure it out. He still thought this was a temperature problem, not structural damage. We have been boiling for weeks, I answered, meeting his eyes. If I come back like this, nothing changes. My fingers tightened on the handle until they hurt. You keep balancing between me and her, and I keep shrinking to fit. His mouth opened like he had an answer ready, then closed again. We both knew nothing honest was coming that would fix it. I do love you, he said finally, words rushed, shoulders sagging. That part hurt almost the most because it was true. I know, I replied, throat tight. And I believe you think that should be enough. Love without boundaries had gotten us exactly here, though. He stepped back as I lifted the suitcase into the trunk. I climbed into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel. Through the windshield, I could see the clean front strip where the statues once stood. A blank space where a story had started and then spiraled. I guess every breakup needs a weird landmark. That was ours. When I pulled away, he stayed on the driveway watching the car. I checked the mirror once and saw him rubbing his face with both hands. For a second I almost turned around, old reflex screaming for a redo. Then I remembered the envelope, the pole, the silence when it counted. I kept driving, letting that list push my foot down. The place I rented was small, no yard, no board, just walls and a lock. First night there, the quiet roared so loud I could not sleep. I walked circles around the room, phone in my hand, thumb hovering over his name. Every time I almost tapped, I pictured a fresh clip on Jenna's feed. Me showing up again as content, the villain who could not let go. Weeks later, an email from the board landed in my inbox. Account updated, outstanding fee cleared by other resident, no further notes. I stared at that line longer than I expected. Part of me felt guilty leaving him with that bill, part of me felt weird relief. He had chosen his line in the story, and now he was paying for it literally. One afternoon I drove across town and ended up near my old neighborhood. I told myself I was just running errands, but you know how that goes. Curiosity steered me down our former street like a magnet. A few houses down from the old place, I spotted one of the familiar figures. Perched in someone else's garden, grinning, harmless, nobody filming it. I parked at the corner and watched for a minute with the engine off. No cameras, no audience, just a cheap statue standing guard over nothing. It looked ridiculous but not threatening, just tacky. And for the first time, the whole thing felt smaller than me. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I did not march up and reclaim it, even though part of me wanted a souvenir. I did not snap a picture for proof or send it to anyone. I just turned the key and drove away. That little figure could stay there, part of someone else's story. I had finally decided I was done being the one everyone tripped over.